Welcome to Rob Ride's Genetics Pop Culture. And on today's show, we're going to talk about the Billy Joel documentary that aired on HBO and HBO Max. It's called And So It Goes. It's in two parts. We're going to talk about both part one and part two. And I'm going to talk about each one of them separately because I've got different opinions about each one of them. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my overall impression for each of them. We're going to tell you about the interviews that are featured in both episodes. I'll tell you about kind of what to expect, kind of the transition and what's in it. And then I'll tell you about the songs that he features in each of these, which ones he talks about and goes into more detail of. So let's get into part one of this. So first off, if you're a Billy Joel fan, I think this is a really good documentary on his life. I think you will be very pleased with it. It's very interesting. You'll find out some things that you may not have known about him. And he'll answer some questions about some of the controversies about him. If you're just a person that likes entertainment and pop culture, I think you would also be entertained by it. I think it's a really well done documentary. Both of them are very good. I think the first one's actually a little bit better than the second one. And I'm going to get into telling you a little bit about that and why I think that. So let's talk about part one. So overall, my overall impression, part one's a 9 out of 10. It's fantastic. It's everything I'd want to know about Billy Joel at this stage in his life. And part one kind of covers from his upbringing all the way through the making of Glass Houses and his motorcycle accident in 1982. So it's very interesting. It talks about really his rise to popularity in the late 70s, early 80s. And he doesn't pull any punches here in this one or the next one. That's what's so great about it. Billy narrates it, and he tells you the good stuff and the bad stuff. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. He addresses all the controversies. And guess what? They interview people that, he may not want you to even talk to about his life. All of his ex-wives are in it, and they have key narration parts. Some of his former bandmates, some of the other producers and other people that he'd had conflicts with throughout his life are in it to give, what happened. And tell you the truth. And that's admirable. I can't believe Billy Joel decided to draw the curtains back and let us peek at this much of his life. So really kudos to him and kudos to HBO and the creators of this documentary for putting this out there because it's rather interesting. Now, Billy Joel himself doesn't find, a documentary about his life to be all that interesting. He lived all of this. Probably some portions of this documentary he doesn't care to relive. But nevertheless, he gave the okay to do it, and he narrates a big chunk of it, especially the opening narration about his life and growing up on Long Island, and then the end of it where he talks about his life and where he's going from here. And he does talk about the songs and the situations all throughout. So he's very much involved in this, which is great. I'm glad to get a first-person account of this. The star of the first documentary episode really, I think, is Elizabeth Weber, who is his ex-wife, his first wife. She also has a son that is Billy's stepson. She had a son before they got married. And she tells a lot about her romance with Billy. She tells a lot about, their struggles moving out to California, living in California, moving back to New York, and his struggles with the record label and her becoming the manager and being his manager for some of his big hits and big hit albums. And, some of the songs that are about her that are good and bad, and some of the songs she may have picked. So it's really interesting. Other things that you have is Liberty DeVito is a prominent band member that they interview. They interview pretty much all the band. You've got celebrities like Bruce Springsteen, who was signed to the same record label a little bit before Billy. Paul McCartney, who comments on one of Billy Joel's songs that really made him go, I wonder who this Billy Joel person is. And it's actually a song that Paul McCartney reveals that he wished he had written. Wow, kind of interesting. Several executives and managers. In the first episode, we get to meet his sister, and she tells you a little about her life. We get to talk to one of his first bandmates when he first went into music and formed a band, and then he formed another band with this other guy, John Small. And there's some interesting controversy with him. He's interviewed. We also have a critic who I think might have been a classmate with him in high school. who knew, him and his hometown of Hicksville, or Hicksville High, where he came from, on Long Island. Really interesting. It's interesting what they had to say. It's interesting how they had to add to his story. So let me tell you a little bit about some of the things that you'll kind of goes over. I'm not going to give away spoilers, but I'll tell you kind of the way this first episode goes. So talks about his childhood growing up. One of the big things is how he was raised by his mom. His father left him and his mom and his sister when he was about 7 or 8 years old. And it really talks about some of the things that his mom did to really raise him and make sure that he got the piano lessons as she saw the gift in him. And it's really heartwarming to hear about her and what she did to keep her family going after that. Talks about his first band and his first love. And you get to find out all the interesting intricacies of that. And to be honest, that I did not know about Billy Joel. I really didn't know about the whole issue with his first wife and his best friend at the time. It's fascinating, guys. Just that alone is worth the price of admission on this. He talks about his first album and the flop, moving to California and trying to make it there. And you really get a big time overview of the history of not only the song, but the album Piano Man. And he tells you about how that song was written and what it's based on and how he writes the songs that he writes. He talks about signing with Columbia and moving back and forth into different managers and kind of how they classified him. Talks a little bit about a rivalry with Elton John a little bit as well. And that's fascinating to hear too. You even have clips of interviews from him back then talking about it too. So you got Billy Joel in the present, the past, talking about the situations of the time. It's really kind of cool. Talks about moving back to New York and forming a band of New Yorkers there, which would become his main bass band. He talks about his wife, Elizabeth, becoming the manager of that band. And oh my goodness, all the struggles that she went through managing 20-something-year-old Long Islanders who were in a band together. So that's really interesting. A lot of the band members are interviewed with that, and they give their thoughts on her, which they don't hold any punches back either. So it's really, really interesting. He talks big time about the breakthrough of the Stranger album and all the details that went into that and how it became a hit and the producer they brought in to make that a hit and, what caused it to be a hit. So very, very cool stuff there. He also gets into 57 Second Street, a little bit more about that album, and then the Glass Houses album. Also goes into details about his motorcycle accident and his divorce, which I didn't know all the details about, but that's basically episode 1. And it's fascinating, his life. So let's talk about some of the songs in here. Of course, we've already mentioned Piano Man. He talks about Piano Man and the writing of that song and who it's based on and the real life situation that it's based on, which is really cool. He talks about Captain Jack, which became a kind of a live song that was played on the radio that became very popular. It tells you a little bit about that. Talks about the song The Entertainer and really what it was intended to do but didn't do, which is very interesting. There was a lot of controversy about that song. He gives you the details of New York State of Mind and how quickly he wrote that song. It happens to be a very interesting story about him moving back to New York and what he did. Very cool, very interesting. And then we get in the Stranger album, and there are quite a few songs from the Stranger album that we talk about in this episode. Of course, he'll tell you about how he came up with the iconic opening to the song The Stranger, which is interesting. And if you're a Billy Joel fan, you probably already know that story. But in case you don't, it's on here. He talks about moving out, and that was one of the first songs they recorded for that album. Another song that has a lot of talk about it and just the intricacies of this song, Just the Way You Are. It tells you how it was made and some of the different things about it, how it became a hit. He talks about Big Shot from his next album, and that's a huge hit for him. And the story about that song is really good. Another song that he mentions is Stiletto. And really, that's another song that his ex-wife talks about. And it's really interesting to find out about that one. And he talks about it in real time and plays part of it. It's really cool. You May Be Right is another one that gets addressed, and It's Still Rock and Roll to Me is another one that gets addressed. Now, one of the other things I'll say about the music, even though the some of the other songs may not specifically be addressed here in this episode, um, they do get played. You do hear stuff in the background. You hear other hits from the Stranger album, from some of his other Streetlight Serenade, 52nd Street, a few others. You'll hear some of those songs in the background of the documentary. But this is pretty much the first part. And I think the first part is fantastic. It's great. Now, he did have some trouble along the way. He made it big time, but there were still some issues with his songs and other stuff and getting the copyrights to him. And that's part of this first episode. But it ends you on a kind of a cliffhanger because it talks about the motorcycle accident and his divorce. And so it's interesting. And that's where we pick up on part 2. Now, these were released 2 weeks apart. So if you saw part 1 when it first came out, you had to wait a few weeks for part 2. And you're like, oh man, what's going to happen in part 2? What else can we say about his life? Well, there's plenty in part 2. Oh my goodness, here we go. So part 2, I didn't think was quite as good as part 1. I think something was missing, and I think it's harder to tell the story because you're already starting with him being a success, but some of his world comes crashing down in a really bad way in this one. And he talks about it, and then he talks about rebuilding it back up, and then he comes back down and back up. It's 2 is more of a wave versus part 1, which is kind of mainly straight up, and then kind of coming down a little bit at the end. Part 2 has a little bit of waviness to it. It's from the Nylon Curtain all the way to the present, where he just completed his last shows in Madison Square Garden at the end of last year, and it's a harder story to tell, to be honest. He's telling you about his mistakes and his triumphs, and there are a lot of them in this part because he's learning how to handle himself and manage himself, and that's very interesting. So of course, Billy Joel's interviewing about this. We get his ex-wives in it. Christy Brinkley is in it, and she's interviewed along with showing her home videos of her time with Billy Joel. She contributed quite a bit, which I found fascinating because, it's amazing that an ex-wife would give that video and talk about that kind of stuff, kind of personal, but kudos to her for opening up the curtain, and kudos to all these ladies for volunteering to do this part of the documentary. I mean, they don't have to say a word, and yet they decide to be part of this, and that's great. Katie Lee is also part of this. We talk about her marriage to Billy and what exactly happened, and it addresses all the rumors in it too. His daughter Alexa Ray Joel, she's in it, and she talks about her life as a kid growing up, and some of the songs that are about her and what it was like living with 2 superstar parents and what the divorce was like and how difficult it was living with them. Sting is interviewed. John Mellencamp is interviewed. Nas is interviewed. Pink is interviewed. I didn't know Pink and was such a big fan, nor did I know who Nas was. Garth Brooks is also interviewed. We meet Billy Joel has a brother, and his brother's interviewed in this. Again, current and former bandmates are also interviewed throughout this, and it's very fascinating. Part 2 has a little bit more controversy, but the tone is different because it's so up and down. Now, the things about part 2 that you'll kind of learn, you kind of learn about his father, and there's a little bit of political slant on part of this. It's not too bad, but I want to warn you, it's there. It's slight, and you think about it, you're sitting there going, but it is what it is, and really, he doesn't get too political at all. And Billy Joel even addresses the fact that, hey, it's just one of the things that happened that will go into his life of his father and his father's family in Germany during the World War II, before and during World War II. So that it does play a little minor role in the story. And Billy himself, doesn't like to get political. He knows people want to come to see him and have a good time and not worry about all the crap going on in the world afterwards. And so that's the only thing that's slightly political. It's not that much. And so I just would warn you that it gets slightly there for one little bit and then it ends really quick. They don't go down any kind of road or any other political slant to it the rest of the show. He tells you about the Nylon Curtain, which Billy considers one of his greatest albums, and how he worked on it and what he did in the studio to do it. One of the unique things about Billy Joel, and one of the reasons why I'm a big fan, is that every single one of his albums, musically, he makes some changes and does something different. It's still pop music, it's still his style, but he does different things in each album and has a different each album has its own unique feel to it, I would say. And that's what I think is so great. And that's the other one of the many reasons why I think his music has stood the test of time, because of that. So he talks about making that album. He talks about after the divorce, the vacation at St. Bart's, and meeting Ellie and Christy. And guess what? He meets another famous person. Oh, by the way, her name's Whitney Houston. So he'll tell that story himself. Although see pictures of him in there. Christy mentioned some of it there too, and it's pretty funny. It's interesting. I like that story. Then he talks about the Innocent Man album, and the Man album is really personal for me. It's one of my favorite Billy Joel albums because it was the first one I ever had, and it was my introduction to him growing up in the MTV era. I love the videos, and he talks about those. They talk about meeting and dating Christy, and they show footage, and Christy gives you footage of them going on trips and doing all kinds of things together that showed their relationship and how it was very loving and lighthearted and fun. They were a great couple, and man, it's kind of cool to see those home videos. It's kind of neat that she decided to pull back the curtain and did that. It's interesting that she still has them after so many years. Talks about the birth of their daughter, which is great. Talks about their tour to Russia, which was interesting. And he basically, says that sometimes it's the artists that are able to break through to the common people, which is great. Talks about losing all his money and having to start again. And that's a big, huge issue. That's a really driving force in his life at that time in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s. Talks about writing Stormfront and the tours. And then it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It gets into his alcohol problems. And that is a big part of a lot of his life in this, is some of his struggles with alcohol. So it talks about that. It talks about the touring and what they did to him. It talks about redoing stuff and taking hold of management and everything else, and then getting into creating a new album with a new producer and new everybody in the River of Dreams, and firing Liberty DeVito. And he gets into that controversy and he talks about it. And Liberty is also interviewed about that. They don't sugarcoat any of it. So he talks about that and coming out with that album. They talk about the divorce with Christy, and you're given the reasons for it. And it's heartbreaking. It's sad. It's crazy. Then he talks about those tours, his first set of tours with Elton John, and what those were like. And they get into that kind of thing. He talks about his classical music album, Fantasies and Delusion. And that's interesting. He mentions how that came about and how it hit #1 on the classical charts. He addresses the automobile accidents that he was in, and some of the rumors around those and what the press did. He talks about his third marriage and what happened there, and their divorce. And his ex-wife is on there to tell her side of it too, and it's straight. It's not sugarcoated at all. And they hint her to dispel some of the rumors that were in the tabloids at the time. So kudos to Billy and his exes for laying it out there. He talks about the second tours with Elton and some of his issues. And then he talks about his current wife and how they met, and the kids that they have. Talks about the huge thing that happened that Sandy, hurricane that came through Long Island and hit it really hard, and a concert for the relief, and how that really inspired him to go back on the road again and pick up a residency in Madison Square Garden that lasted 10 years. Amazing. And then finally, it kind of ends with, his family and this wonderful gift of music that he has, that he's passed down to his family members, and his outlook on the rest of his life. And, basically what it tells you about Billy Joel is that here's the reality of it. Despite his successes and failures, honestly, he's a human being just like you and me. We all have our successes. We all have our failures. We all have our struggles. We all have our high moments and our low moments. And it's, what you do in those moments that really make you and shape you for who you are. And so he talks about that. Finally, let's talk about the songs in part 2 that he really gets into. These are interesting. Some of his more well-known songs, especially in the 80s. Pressure. He talks a lot about that song. Allentown gets addressed. Goodnight Saigon is another good one that gets addressed. And then we talked about the videos. Tell Her About It, which is a song he hasn't played since the early 90s, because it's just, the problem is the key is way too high for him to sing. And it was a number one song. And it's one of the few artists that won't play their number one song ever again. But it's just, it's way too high a key. But he talks about the video, Uptown Girl video. You get a feel for that. The Longest Time video is shown and mentioned. An Innocent Man, that song is mentioned and shown. Then A Matter of Trust in Russia is done. You see some of that. Baby Grand, they go into more detail with Ray Charles, which is great. He talks about writing We Didn't Start the Fire. I Go to Extremes is addressed in this. The Downeaster Alexa is played throughout. It's somewhat addressed, but it's featured prominently in this. Of course, the main song, that's the title of it, is addressed towards the end. It's And So It Goes. And that's a very personal song to Billy. It's actually one of my favorite Billy Joel songs of all time. Very, very interesting song, very introspective song, and I love it. It's great. And of course, he talks about River of Dreams and that song and how it came to be. And then a final song that he talks about, and his daughter even talks about it briefly, which is really hard for her to do without tearing up, is Lullaby, Goodnight My Angel. So overall, I say that the first episode's a 9, the second one's an 8, just because the second one could have been arranged a little bit better, but the story is so up and down and difficult to say. The first one's more straightforward. That's why I think it's a little bit better, but both are very good. Definitely check these out if you're a Billy Joel fan. If you're not, it might be something you might be interested in, just because it has a lot about celebrity and the rise and fall of fame and music business, and just all the things that go with that. But anyway, that's all I've got for this episode. I hope you like it, guys. I hope you check it out. Let me know if you've seen it, your thoughts, and then please leave a like and subscribe and comments below. YouTube has their algorithms, and I definitely need the watch time and would love to have you guys comment on there. Also, my other reviews will be linked below, so check those out, and we'll definitely see you on the next one.